Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm your host, John Johnson. It's episode 17, and on this particular podcast, I'm going to talk about being honest with yourself. It is something I think we all have the opportunity to revisit from time to time, and in my own experience, I've certainly had challenges with that. It wasn't necessarily about telling lies. It was more to the understanding of what am I doing to myself? And when I say honesty, let me give you an example. I am an optimist in general, and I think that's one of the reasons why people like me. Also, I'm a person that tends to love to do favors, and where that puts me oftentimes is in a position of where I don't do a very good job of taking care of myself. Therefore, I have to look at that in that context and say for myself, am I hurting or helping me? And learning to say no. I just talked about that in episode 16 in some of the fallout that happens when you don't learn to say no. This is another thing about learning to be honest with myself, because one of the things that has happened in my experience is I've lost integrity many times because of this. I wind up trying to cover my tracks because I get overextended and then turn around and I don't necessarily really rethink the problem that I'm creating for myself. That's the thing about being honest with yourself, that you have to really see where you contribute to the problem. And because I didn't for many, many, many times, I wound up having to do what's called damage control. And it doesn't look very good when you're constantly in that place. And you really have to stop and learn to be honest with yourself. That was difficult for me. And I believe it was difficult for the reason of thinking that I did not want to let somebody else down. And I had to learn to create more opportunities for myself to do things for me rather than externalizing all of these issues. Well, by having that really difficult self-talk, things began to turn around for me, and really looking at this from the standpoint of I was creating problems more than I was solving them. Because it's one thing to take on a favor for someone and then try to make it successful, but there are a lot of times it wasn't happening the way that it was expected to, because I wasn't honest about how long it would take me and about what effort it took. I didn't communicate those kinds of things, and I wound up feeling used. But whose fault was that? It was my own. And this getting honest with myself, the self-talk, the understanding that I'm doing too much, and not being realistic about what the expectations should be, it was a make or break situation. And if you've experienced this, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It really becomes incumbent upon you to see the reality in the situation and not necessarily expect someone else to point it out for you. Because there are those individuals that see you as being their savior, and it is very difficult to turn them down, turn them away, because for whatever reason you may feel bad. But you have to learn that saying no is as okay as saying yes. And again, podcast 16, I talked about saying no, but this sort of relates to that. But I'm talking about the honesty, the self-talk, what it takes to persevere, because these are lessons that you are teaching yourself that you're going to carry through for the rest of your life. And learning to do that, learning to be constructive, it helps you from having the breakdowns and all of the misery that comes with this. Now, these learning experiences, life is going to be difficult enough. And learning to say no, learning to be honest with yourself, And having realistic expectations is a lifelong journey. But it's also something that you learn to build upon. And based upon how well you take care of yourself, it could be health. It could impact your financial health, your physical health, mental health, and in many cases, those around you. So learn to be honest with yourself. And when it comes to certain requests, remember it's okay to say no. Learn to communicate your feelings and learn to be okay with yourself. We'll be right back after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I am John Johnson. And you know what? I want to segue into something here, and it happens to be about the subject of your relationship being stale. Now, I can relate not because of my partner, because she's not stale, I am. I have been the guy who has not done the hiking and the camping and the kinds of things like that are off the beaten path. I tend to be pretty driven to the work that I do. And when that's all done, I tend to be pretty tired. I can stay up late. I don't necessarily watch a lot of TV because I'm not a big TV watcher, but I do consume a lot of information. I read a great deal. So I thank a teacher for that, for being able to teach me how to read. But, back to the staleness. And this is something you kind of have to see. You get the feedback from your partner that when you're not doing things that they like to do. That's one of those things you have to be really conscious of. You have to ask the question. And I mean, it's great when you have a partner who's very self-directed, who can do their own thing. But the thing that you also don't want to do is you don't want to lose touch. You don't want to lose contact with what it is that they feel and how they're operating. And podcast 16, I talked about listening to your partner's concerns. And, that's the very important thing to be able to do, was you can say bye-bye relationship. And in my own case, that's something that I have to continually work on. I'm good at listening and I'm good at problem solving, but I think the execution part of this, and we're talking about the staleness, and that's on doing what they want to do. That's something that we have to learn to listen for and to make ourselves available for. I learn a great deal by what I see going on out there in the world in being a good observer. And by contrasting that to how I operate, then sometimes I learn a great deal about that. I've learned a great deal about myself. And I'm very loving, very forgiving, I think, and I try to embrace what it is that, other people's experience and not try to make it about me. So I'm good at that aspect. But when it comes to experiencing some of these other things that, my partner will want me to experience, then I tend to not be so good at that because I tend to have my head in my own little world. So I'm trying to learn to get unhooked from that and try different things. So in communicating this to you, it would be about talking about not being stale. So whether it's hiking, whether it's camping, whether it's, guys, they tend to not know how to be a good shopping companion. And I say that because when I talk to the guys and what their experience is, guys like to go get what it is they want to get and walk out the door. They tend to be very linear focused. And I know women, and I'm not trying to generalize, but I'm making a statement because of women that I've talked to. They don't meet a lot of guys that want to do the shopping thing, so they tend to do it on their own. But there and again, they wouldn't mind a little company. So guys, if you can separate yourself from the idea that it can only be done your way and go shopping, you might get a little input into what the outfit's going to look like if it's the going for the clothes shopping. The other thing that tends to happen is some people, it's the grocery shopping. I love the grocery shop. I could spend all day in a store because I just tend to wander up and down the aisles and start picking things as I see them. And some people hate that part. But if you're the person that does it and you want companionship, communicate that. That might break a little bit of the staleness out of what's going on. So there's going to hiking, cycling, just taking a drive and seeing something different, getting out of the neighborhood. That's always nice. Yeah, the hiking thing, at least it's, you're not burning fossil fuels. And if you're the person who's earth first, then certainly saving the environment is really important. Overall, it's about hearing your partner and breaking up the staleness of what's going on. And you got to see that. Hey, you're a part of that. Make a change. Make a change for the better and be happy about it. I'm going to take a little break and we'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Something that I'm sure we can all relate to, it's the idea of somebody else being in pain. And when you hear about it or when you experience it firsthand, you can imagine what this does. Now, what I'm going to touch on is the aspect of when you are a friend of somebody who's been in pain, physical pain, emotional, mental, however it lands on them, but seeing them go through the suffering. And how do you handle that? How do you resolve to not take it on yourself, but to be able to be a support person when you can be there, and then still take care of yourself and not feel guilty about who you are and what you've experienced? Those of us who have been able to live a healthy and productive life and like to feel grateful that we have the benefits that exist for us. And when we see someone who is in a place of suffering and they are not, and it could even be close to an end-of-life issue. I've known friends who have suffered from a terrible disease of cancer, and it's very gut-wrenching to know that their life is going to come to a close. Now, many of them are very, very, very brave, and they handle the end-of-life issues, getting wills together, getting family members that come together and saying their goodbyes. And that is certainly a very, very difficult thing to do. And I've seen communities of people come around those individuals and support them in their hour of need. And giving like that is a way to help deal with what you as an individual go through, seeing someone else's life take that kind of turn. Because I know sometimes there is that guilt that comes over you when it's not happening to you, but you see a lot of misery going on around you. And when it's not happening to you, sometimes it's you have this way of relating to it, but not, because it's not happening to you, and you might feel guilty. Well, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to feel guilty because it's not happening to you. You can be supportive of someone that's going through something and give as much as you reasonably feel you can, and then feel okay to step back from that and also allow other people to contribute. And I think the thing to not do is feel guilty because it's not happening to you. That is one of those really interesting twists when you're very sensitive and you are able to show empathy and sympathy and those sorts of things. That is part of the human emotion experience. Because there's a wide range of things that we feel as human beings, and it's also very natural to feel sometimes a bit guilty, if I can use that word, if I can borrow that for a moment, that you have it well and somebody else doesn't. And this is to say, when you experience that, you don't have to stop yourself and then say, I am ungrateful. This shouldn't be happening to me. Because whatever good fortune you have, you've earned it. Own that. Be okay with that. Be at peace with that. But it's also okay to be there for someone else and be supportive. Please do that. That's part of your human experience too. And I think it helps balance things out. And you tend to learn how you can be a lover and a giver. And then as those experiences happen to you, it changes you. It's supposed to. It's probably how it helps you become very compassionate and be very giving. And those of you that have great fortunes, whether it be financial or whatever your gifts are, then you learn to be able to share and make this a better world, make it a better community that you exist in. And I think that's part of the process of being a human being. But when you see someone going through pain, and I've watched people who have gone through drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and what it does to them, their families, what it's done to me as a person, and wanting to be helpful, be cause in the matter, try to help point them in the right direction. It has certainly been beneficial to me to also understand my good fortune and to appreciate myself, because oftentimes in those experiences, I have not appreciated myself in that I didn't realize how well I had it. Not in terms of not being grateful, but I think in terms of really accepting and understanding how hard I have worked to be where I am and that I do deserve. So what would start out as maybe sort of a guilt thing, feeling like I don't deserve to be where I am, it changes, and I begin to appreciate the hard work that I put into it. And the fact that I do have something extra that I can lend, that I can share with somebody else to help make their situation better, then it makes my life more at peace, because I feel like I'm giving and contributing to society. And that's how I want to feel. And I believe that that's the emotion, that's the feeling I want to convey to you about your experience, that you don't have to feel guilty about doing well, about being able to own your success. And it's taking that and being a good steward and sharing the best of you and who you are. Something else I'm going to relate to you here is when, now this can also be a very painful thing, but when you are intimately involved with somebody who is abusing drugs or alcohol or any sort of substance, but those are very prominent, very prevalent things. And the alcohol it's out there. You're there to buy it. Drugs, it could be illegal drugs. It could be prescription drugs. But the problem is when you are dealing with someone who has an abuse problem. I had somebody who was very near and dear to me, who had an alcohol problem, and I didn't understand it in the beginning. I didn't know the signs. It took a while before it finally surfaced, because what I was experiencing, and just to say it, this person had an alcohol problem. What I was experiencing was trying to have conversations, and I was not being heard. It was the endless phone calls that seemed as if I could have just set the phone down and have walked away, did something, came back, and the person was still talking. And the experience of that in your life can be very heart-wrenching, because when it's somebody that you love, it's, how do you let them go? How do you separate yourself from that? And what I can begin to tell you is that it's one of the most difficult things that I've ever experienced. If you've experienced alcoholic behavior, meaning you've had a family member, that maybe a parent, a mom or dad or something like that, maybe even a sibling, but what you learn to do in those familial experiences is you learn to compensate. And you carry that experience forward with you. I mean, you learn to, because of your love for that person, that relationship in your life, that pet parent or that sibling, you compensate, and you carry that ability to do that sometimes far above and beyond anything that most ordinary people would even expect to have to do. But I know there are millions of you out there that experience this. As you get older, and then you become involved with somebody that maybe they drink, and I have nothing against people that consume alcohol. That's really not what this is about. This is about understanding when you're a person who's in a relationship with somebody who does that. So this is not a judgment thing. This is just what happens in that experience for you when you're trying to compensate for someone else's inability to control themselves. And you might make excuses for them. And there begins the cascade of things that happens for you. You tend to want to protect them from themselves. And a lot of times you yourself may be going into denial about what is happening to them. But you have already been programmed to compensate for this, especially if you're a child of an alcoholic. And I want you to understand that when this shows up again in your life, why you might not see it as being a problem that's too big for you to handle. What I'm suggesting is it's not something that is necessarily going to stop you from being a good person. It's not necessarily going to stop your life, but it's definitely going to have an impact on you, on your mood, your ability to function, because these things are going to pull back all of those childhood memories, and it's going to put you in a place of feeling very, very, it's going to bring up all the fear that has happened in the past. And it may be fear of abandonment, because when you're a child of an alcoholic, one of the things that happens is sometimes you're left to fend for yourself because the alcoholic is not available, because they're either passed out drunk. And sometimes that being a young age and having to fend for yourself, there may be safe places, safe things that you can do, and there may have been experiences and things that you got into that weren't so safe, and those things left an impression on you. And again, this is the cascade of things that happens. So when you are in a relationship later on in life, and I'm talking about that place right now, and you're dealing with a person and they have brought back all of those feelings, okay, what are you going to do? Well, one of the things you're going to do is, first, you need to recognize that you're in that spot. And you also want to be communicating with the person who has the abuse problem that what you're experiencing. And I want you to be able to think about it for yourself so that you can explain this. Now, they may not even be able to comprehend it, and it might be something that is familiar to them, but you need to be in that conversation. And to begin to deal with an alcohol situation, you need professional help. If it's drug addiction, because nowadays what we observe is that there are a lot of prescription medications out there, and there are a lot of people in pain for all kinds of reasons. And again, this is not judgment of that. This is the fact that it exists, and it's what do you do about it? Well, when you're the person who is a support person of that person who's feeling a lot of pain, realize that it does have an impact on you. It impacts your life. And it's helpful to be willing to if you have to deal with the addiction problem for them, to go with them to a counselor so that they can begin to understand themselves, what's happening. And if they're self-medicating because of the pain, then really need to find a way to change the trajectory of this and not have them continue to take more and more meds. Because there comes a point in time in life when your body cannot consume enough to take care of the problem, and it makes you do other crazy things. And that becomes very scary. To experience that in your life will definitely leave a lasting impression on you. And sometimes in the worst of circumstances, it'll end your life. And it's not just suicide, but it could be the irresponsible behavior. Maybe take a car out for a drive and you're not in control of the situation and you hurt yourself, or the person hurts themselves, and also, unfortunately, they may hurt other people in the same process. So it's to prevent these kinds of things from getting as bad as they can get, as they can get. So hopefully I've given you enough suggestions there to begin to have the conversation, to begin to recognize when these things start to happen, that it may be a very uncomfortable place for you to be. Because certainly if it's touching upon the very painful things that have happened in your past, to have to be in a relationship with somebody who may be going the same direction as those tragic things that happened to you, is going to be very painful, and it may be very frightening, and may even put you in panic mode, because you definitely want to stop this from happening. It's going to take a lot of courage. You're going to have to face your fears and be in communication about it. Tell the person what you think is happening, and ultimately, they're going to have to buy into it, because it's about changing their behavior as much as it is you recognizing and being a support person. And there may come a time in this experience where you're going to have to separate yourself from them. That could be a very, very painful thing to have to do. And when you're a person who's very empathic and you have that part of yourself that really experiences other people's pain and experiences in that way, it's extremely difficult for you to separate yourself from it, but you have to learn to do that. And every day is a new day. So when you wake up, it's the first day for the rest of your life, and do the best you can, but you take it day by day. So as you go through this journey called life, and in taking on these things, I want to applaud you for having the courage to live your life and to learn from your experiences, and to be willing to make other people's lives better as well. So take it on. It's your life. There are many people out there that want to help you and support you. You can go on the websites and find drug and alcohol counselors, people that deal with abuse, people that deal with grief. There are many, 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 many resources out there. And I say that because I've talked to many professionals that are in that field of work, and they do it for the love of humanity. And I encourage you to take that on yourself as well. Meaning, if you need the help, you need the support, get it. There's no shame in raising your own awareness as well as that, giving the love and support to the people that need it. I'm John Johnson. Thank you for listening to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Join me again next time.